Thanksgiving night, my father said loudly. She's the one who dropped out of college, remember? My cousin smirked. Oh, right, the family flop. My mother shook her head. Such a waste of potential. I leaned over and said, funny. I just hired your boss. It was during dessert when it all really blew up. There we were, my parents, brother, aunt, uncle, and my cousin Reagan, all gathered around my aunt's long oak table in their big Needham home. The smell of roast turkey still hung in the air, half covered by the faint, bitter aroma of espresso from the Nespresso machine my uncle insisted on using, despite nobody liking it. We were making small talk, or trying to. My mother had just brought up someone's engagement, someone I didn't know, a daughter of a neighbor. And somehow the conversation shifted, as it often did, to college, careers, and who's doing what now. That's when my dad leaned back in his chair, fork resting on his plate, and said loudly, almost offhandedly, "She's the one who dropped out of college, remember?" The pause that followed was one of those long, suspended silences where you feel your heart drop into your stomach. I didn't even look up. Then Reagan smirked and said, "Oh right, the family flop." My mother didn't laugh. She didn't need to. She just shook her head and muttered, "Such a waste of potential." That was when I put down my fork and said, as calmly as I could, "Funny, I just hired your boss. I'm Rowena, I'm 32 now. I was 20 when I dropped out of Suffolk University. I was studying design. Loved it. Art, creativity, it was always my way of making sense of the world. I didn't have a big, dramatic reason for dropping out. No partying, no bad grades from laziness. It was actually grief. My sophomore roommate died by suicide, and while we weren't best friends, we lived together, shared meals, late-night Netflix. We had plans for a weekend in the Berkshires that never happened. After she passed, I just unraveled. Slowly at first, like a loose thread, then all at once. The campus didn't have enough mental health support. The counseling center told me they were booked solid for weeks. I felt numb, directionless. I stopped going to class. I started sleeping during the day, staying up at night drawing random things that didn't make sense. When I called home, I lied. I said I was fine. Eventually, I dropped out. Quietly. I emailed the registrar and packed my things. When I came home, my parents didn't scream. I think I would have preferred that. Instead, they acted like I had a cold I should have kicked by now. They never asked what happened. They just asked what my next steps were. I had none. I waited tables, picked up some cash from odd design gigs on Fiverr, and tried not to feel like I was wasting space in my childhood bedroom. My brother Silas, older by 4 years, was already working in finance in Boston. Reagan, my cousin, was 2 years older than me, finishing Columbia. The golden girl. Her mother, my mom's sister, always brought up her internships, her mentors, her glowing references. She'd be working at Ember and Ash, a top-tier branding agency, by the end of the year. Meanwhile, I was making latte art and pretending I didn't care. My mom offered helpful gems like maybe beauty school. My dad suggested I learn coding. No one said, "Are you okay?" I moved out when I was 22. Took a tiny room in a 4-bedroom apartment in Allston. Worked nights at a restaurant called Red Lantern in Back Bay. It was trendy, filled with tech execs and startup types who tipped well. One of our regulars, a man named Milo, maybe mid-50s, always alone, always sketching, caught my eye one night. We talked. He noticed my notebook full of logos and packaging ideas. He turned out to be the creative director at a boutique agency. "You've got an eye," he said after flipping through a few pages. "Ever thought of doing this professionally?" I told him I didn't have a degree. He shrugged. "Neither do half the best people I know." He offered me an unpaid internship. I took it. I worked nights at the restaurant and days on design. Over the next 2 years, I built my portfolio from the ground up. Milo mentored me, introduced me to clients, helped me understand branding. Not just design, but story, strategy, positioning. I took online courses in business and marketing. It was lonely work. No sick days, no paid time off. But slowly, things changed. By 27, I had founded my own studio, Wolf House Creative. I didn't tell my family. I didn't want to hear their fake support or passive-aggressive questions. "Oh, so it's like a freelance thing? Or do people really pay for that kind of stuff?" At first, it was just me. Then I hired freelancers, then a project manager, a developer, a strategist. By 30, we had a team of 12, mostly remote. We worked with boutique hotels, ethical beauty brands, indie tech startups. I had clients in LA, Austin, and even abroad. Still, when I came home for the holidays, my parents would introduce me as doing something with art. One Thanksgiving, my mom actually told a neighbor I was between jobs. I just let it go. But this past Thanksgiving, it was different. I had just wrapped a huge project, branding for a 5-property hotel chain in Colorado. I'd flown back from a client summit in Sedona and landed the night before. I was exhausted, still mentally unpacking. We did the usual family routine. Awkward hugs, wine, passive-aggressive compliments. My brother Silas talked about his third promotion. Reagan talked about Ember and Ash's rebranding initiative. I said little, just tried to make it through the stuffing. Then my father made the college dropout comment. Reagan called me a flop. My mother shook her head, genuinely disappointed, like I had thrown away a full-ride scholarship to Harvard to become a clown. And something in me just gave out. So I leaned over and said, "Funny. I just hired your boss." Reagan blinked. Confused, I added, "Kelsey, the creative director at Ember and Ash. She starts at Wolf House next week." And then I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a drink. That was it. Nobody said anything for a while. I didn't go back to the table. The next day, Reagan texted me. She said she hadn't realized how much I'd accomplished and wanted to meet up sometime. My mom sent a long email asking about my business journey and how proud they are. Silas even sent a LinkedIn request. I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. The truth is, I don't know what to do. They weren't there when I was broke, anxious, working myself into the ground for clients who ghosted or paid late. They weren't there when I lay on the floor of my apartment, wondering if I had made a huge mistake. Now they want to be proud of me because I have something to show for it. I'm still trying to figure out if I want them in this new chapter, or if it's better to just keep the door closed. I don't need validation anymore, but I still wonder if I should give them another chance. Not because they deserve it, but because maybe I do. I didn't reply to anyone for days after Thanksgiving. Not to my mom's email, which opened with, "We had no idea you were doing so well," and ended with a "maybe we could come visit your studio someday." Not to Reagan's text, which came the next morning. "Didn't mean to be rude last night. Just surprised. Would love to talk sometime." Not even to my father, who called twice. He doesn't call. He texts birthdays and sends photos of parking violations from his HOA meetings. Instead, I threw myself back into work. The December client rush was in full swing: holiday campaigns, early Q1 rollouts, website overhauls for brands trying to refresh for the new year. I had deadlines, meetings, and a staff that relied on me. But even while buried in strategy calls and typeface revisions, the memory of that night kept showing up in my mind like a tab I couldn't close. My therapist, Sonal, said something interesting when I finally brought it up in our weekly Zoom session. "You didn't just prove them wrong. You reclaimed a version of yourself they never bothered to see in the first place." She wasn't wrong. I had spent years building this life, carefully, brick by brick, in total silence from the people who were supposed to know me best. And now, with one sentence over dry pumpkin pie and some Pinot Noir, they suddenly wanted in. And the worst part, I wanted them to want in. At least, some part of me did. The Sunday after Thanksgiving, I finally opened my mom's email again. I read it slower this time. I could practically hear her voice in the words. Formal, overly polite, trying not to sound like she was fishing but absolutely fishing. She asked if I needed help with accounting. I almost laughed. She had no idea what I did, not really. She still thought business meant piles of paper and a front desk. There was a sentence toward the end that stood out, though. "I guess I always thought you were struggling because you didn't say much. I didn't want to pressure you by asking too many questions. Maybe I should have." That one got to me. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Mid-December, I got lunch with Kelsey, the former creative director from Ember and Ash, the same one Reagan reported to. She was thrilled to join Wolf House. Said she felt like she was jumping off a sinking ship. "They've got talent," she told me, slicing into a beet salad at Tat in the South End. "But no soul, just spreadsheets and buzzwords." I asked carefully if she knew Reagan. Kelsey rolled her eyes. "Oh, Reagan, she's fine. Smart, ambitious, but not exactly a team player." I didn't dig further. I didn't need to. That told me enough. After that meeting, I almost texted Reagan back. I didn't. But I typed out a message, erased it, typed again. Hey, thanks for reaching out. I've been busy with end-of-year stuff. Hope things are going well for you. I left it in drafts. Christmas came and went. I didn't go home. My mother tried to guilt me into coming, even offered to cook, whatever you like, and said I could bring a friend or partner if there is one. I told her I had plans. I did my own. I spent it at my place with Briscoe, some friends from the design world, and a mountain of Chinese takeout. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years, but the silence after was heavier. When I finally called my dad mid-January, he didn't say much, just that they missed me and hoped I was doing well. He asked about my business stuff, but I could tell he didn't know what to ask. It wasn't malicious, it was just a chasm of unfamiliarity between us that neither of us had figured out how to cross. Then came February. Reagan called, not texted. Called, I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Tired, maybe. Hey, Ro, just wanted to say again I'm sorry if I was out of line at Thanksgiving. It wasn't fair. I think I was jealous, honestly. You've built something. You didn't follow the path and still ended up ahead. I guess I'm trying to figure things out too. Anyway, I'd love to catch up sometime if you're open to that. I listened to it twice. Then I sat in silence in my apartment, staring at my laptop. The screen glowed with a mood board for a luxury skincare brand in Iceland. It all felt surreal. Reagan, jealous. It had never even crossed my mind that she could feel that way. She was always ahead, always praised, always so sure of herself. And now, suddenly, she was reaching out not from her pedestal, but from a place I recognized. Doubt. I told Sonal about the call. She smiled and asked me what I wanted. Not what I should do, not what would be right. Just what I wanted. The truth was, I didn't know. Part of me wanted to say, too little, too late. To let the distance stay. To preserve this version of myself I had built in solitude, without their approval, without their applause. But another part of me remembered being 20. Sitting in my childhood bedroom at 3 a.m., sobbing quietly so no one would hear, wishing someone, anyone, would ask if I was okay. And maybe, just maybe, this was their version of finally asking. So I called Reagan. Her voice was warm, nervous. Humans. We didn't talk long, just 20 minutes or so. She told me she wasn't happy at Ember and Ash, that she felt stuck, that the agency world wasn't what she expected. She asked about Wolf House, not as a job opportunity, but just curiosity. I always thought you dropped out because you couldn't handle the pressure, she said. I didn't realize it was something deeper. I told her I didn't either. Not for a long time. She didn't ask for a job. I appreciated that. Before we hung up, she said, I know I've been kind of a brat, probably still am, but I admire what you've done. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I haven't decided yet how close I want to get to my family again. The dynamic is still fragile, still a little sharp around the edges. My mother keeps trying, in her own way. Sends me design ideas she thinks are cute, or emails articles about women in business. My father mentioned maybe stopping by my office sometime. Sila's still hasn't said much. And me, I'm still building, still dreaming, still carving out space in a world that wasn't built for people like me to thrive. But for the first time, maybe I'm open to the idea that healing isn't weakness. That letting people try, after they've failed you, isn't surrender. It's a choice, and right now, I'm just taking it slow. The call with Reagan was the first domino. Not in the dramatic, everything changes in a movie way, but in a subtle, tectonic shift that's only obvious when you look back later. I didn't make grand announcements to my family after that. No email chains, no invitations. But slowly, I allowed small, deliberate windows to open. I posted one of Wolf House campaigns on my personal Instagram, our rebranding for an eco-resort chain in Vermont that had just gotten picked up in a design magazine. My mom commented, "So proud of you." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. I invited my parents to the open house at my new studio in Fort Point in April. I knew they wouldn't understand most of what they saw: clean white walls, exposed brick, design boards pinned up like modern art, but I wanted them to see it. To see me. And they came. My mother wore a cardigan too warm for the weather. My father brought a six-pack of Sam Adams, because you never know when beer's more welcome than champagne. It was awkward at first. They said things like, "Oh, you have employees," and "Wow, this is all yours." I watched them recalibrate their perception of me in real time, and something deep inside me, something small and sore and old, felt soothed. Not forgiven, but soothed. The revenge, I realized, was never about them kneeling or groveling. It was this, watching them walk through a space I built with my own hands, feeling unsure of themselves for once in their lives, while I stood perfectly still. I showed them around, let them talk to my team, introduced them to Kelsey, who now led strategy and creative development for our biggest accounts. My mother's eyes went wide when Kelsey casually mentioned we just signed a European luxury brand. Later, as the night wrapped, my dad pulled me aside near the kitchen, where the catering staff was packing up hors d'oeuvres. I didn't get it before, he said. I thought college was the only road. I was wrong. He didn't apologize, not really. But again, it was something. A few months later, Wolf House was approached by a corporate event planning firm looking to revamp their image, branding, marketing, everything. I recognized the name instantly. It was the firm that handled all of Ember and Ash's corporate conferences and internal summits. And as it turns out, one of our contacts on the project was a junior strategist who used to work with Reagan. We had a Zoom call. He was friendly, curious about our approach. Toward the end of the call, he said, "By the way, I remember your cousin. Reagan, right?" I smiled politely. "That's her." "She left a little while ago, yeah," he asked. "Heard she tried to go solo." That was news to me. I reached out to Reagan the next week. She confirmed it. "Left Ember and Ash 2 months ago," she said. "Didn't feel right anymore. Thought I'd freelance a bit. See if I can build something." It wasn't said with bravado, just quiet clarity. "I respect that," I told her. There was a long pause. Then she said, "If I'm honest, I've been looking at what you've done with Wolf House for inspiration." And that was the full circle moment. Not because I wanted to gloat, but because the girl who once called me a flop was now asking questions about branding proposals and client acquisition. I offered to connect her with a few freelancers who were between projects. She accepted, grateful, humble, different. It wasn't an offer of mentorship, not yet, but it was a door one I was willing to leave open. This past Thanksgiving, 1 year to the day since that infamous dinner I hosted, it felt surreal. My team had grown again, now 18 strong. We had just opened a small LA satellite office. Briscoe had his own bed under my desk and got more attention than any of us on client calls. I invited my parents. Sela's. Even Reagan. We kept it simple, no long speeches, no pointed remarks. Just food, wine, and a little soft jazz playing from the speakers. At one point, my father raised a toast. He stood up, glass in hand, and said, "To Rowena, who built something extraordinary, even if we were too blind to see it at first." It wasn't rehearsed, and it wasn't perfect, but it landed. People clinked glasses. My mother dabbed at her eyes. Sila's even gave me a nod, his version of a standing ovation. And Reagan, she came up to me in the kitchen after while I was putting away the pies. "You're not the family flop," she said. "You're the blueprint." I smiled. Guess we're all still figuring things out. That was my revenge. Not cold, not cruel, just complete. I didn't scream. I didn't write them off. I just kept going until they had no choice but to look up. And when they did, I was already gone from the shadows of their expectations, standing in the light of my own life.